Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, we've been doing so many shows on transfer portal departures and transfer portal targets that this feels almost quaint. An Ohio State football player leaving the Ohio State football program, and it's just for the NFL draft. It's like, boy, this is like really old timey.
I was going to say, leaving college football the old fashioned way by turning pro early and heading to the NFL. We are, of course, in this episode, talking about wide receiver Carnell Tate, junior wide receiver, starting a 2-year starter for the Buckeyes. And, of course, this was not a major surprise. And based on his play this year, warranted. Some are calling him wide receiver one of the draft. And, gosh, if you would just draft the first, just draft an Ohio State receiver first amongst the receivers overall since 2018 or whatever, you'd probably be doing pretty well. And Carnell Tate looks like he's the next guy in line. 51 catches, which surprisingly, Tom, is actually a couple fewer than the 50, actually one fewer than the 52 he had last year, and a bit of a different role. But 51 catches, 875 yards, 9 touchdowns. A guy that was a really nice compliment to Jeremiah Smith, but also wasn't a second fiddle because he was plenty good to be wide receiver one anywhere he played.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking at Mel Kiper's big board right now, because this is Mel Kiper's season. He is wide receiver one in the NFL draft right now, projected as a top 10 pick. So, yeah, if you were a top 10 pick, you are not playing second fiddle to anyone. And this is not a new thing for Ohio State to have. You look at some of the other programs with highly projected wide receivers on the board, and it's like Mekhi Lemon, and who else do USC have? No one else that you're probably seeing in the top 10 in the draft anytime in the near future. Carnell Tate, man, you would have loved to see a fully healthy season for Carnell Tate, because I suspect his numbers would have been substantially better than they were a year prior. But, he certainly was someone who came up big in some big moments for the Buckeyes. Had, even after coming back from that injury, had a touchdown against Michigan, had a touchdown in the Big Ten championship game, and was someone who was, I think, a very easy person to root for. Obviously had some tragedy in his personal life during his time at Ohio State, but really, he's one of those guys that you hear people say just never flinched, never blinked, just kind of kept working hard, kept doing things the right way. And I think was someone who is going to be someone who, when you're listing, hey, here's these great Ohio State wide receivers in the NFL, he's going to be someone that's going to be on that list, and people who I think Ohio State fans are going to have an easy time rooting for moving forward.
Yeah, a college career more akin to a Terry McLaurin than an Emeka Ibuka, where neither one of those guys were necessarily ever the guy on their team, but both went to the NFL and will be the guy on their team. Emeka Ibuka kind of went under the radar playing with Marvin Harrison and with Jeremiah Smith, but also a 2-time 1,000-yard receiver, one of only 3 now, joining Jeremiah Smith and Marvin Harrison. But Carnell Tate, never a 1,000-yard receiver, much like Terry McLaurin, but always advanced, always mature, always ready with whatever was needed. And I will remind people, his true freshman year in 2023 of 18 catches was at the time, the 6th most among true freshmen in Ohio State modern football history. And, of course, Jeremiah goes and blows that out of the water. But 18 catches, 264 yards, and a touchdown as a true freshman, numbers that weren't typical. And he came in, Tom, and we all remember what Marvin Harrison had to say about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going when I was like, I hope he stops talking soon so I can talk about the Marvin Harrison thing. So thank you for stopping talking, as always. Always grateful when you stop talking. Yeah, I go back to, it was Carnell Tate's freshman year and Marvin Harrison Jr. still at Ohio State, and he's talking about the fact that Carnell Tate is ahead of where I was when I was his age, basically. And I mean, that's true. Marvin Harrison had, 9 catches or something like that as a true freshman, and really only came on in the Rose Bowl when He sort of got that opportunity when Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson opted out of the Rose Bowl, and that's when Marvin Harrison sort of burst onto the scene. Carnell Tate was a factor earlier than that with the 2023 Buckeyes, and he was someone who I think just sort of progressed and was just really steady, really reliable. Someone that was probably, I think he's going to go down. Terry McLaurin, I think, is a good comp, because I think he's going to be a little bit underrated as people look back at these Ohio State teams where, he had these huge moments. And I always go back to the game at Wrigley Field when he's returning to his hometown of Chicago and had a couple touchdown catches, including that incredible diving catch, and almost had a third, got stopped at like the 1 yard line on one of them. But, that will always be kind of the Carnell Tate moment to me. But had that touchdown against Michigan in the snow, had the touchdown in the Big Ten championship against Indiana. And, he's someone who I think is going to be a little bit underappreciated because he never had the Jeremiah Smith season. He never had the Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rose Bowl type game. He just was really steady, really reliable. And also, when you're playing with Marvin Harrison, when you're playing with Jeremiah Smith, it's easy to kind of get, a little bit lost because you're not necessarily the guy whose name is, in the big font at the top of the movie poster, but really, really always just a consistent, really good player and someone that I think Ohio State fans probably, like I said, will not remember as great as he really, truly was for the Buckeyes over the years.
Well, and I was just looking over at his game log, and he missed a couple of games, missed a few games this year, missed one game last year. The only time he played and did not catch a pass were 2 times as a freshman. He played in every game as a true freshman, only went catchless in 2 games, which that alone is an outstanding, incredible stat for a true freshman wide receiver at Ohio State. He's one of the rare freshman backups to be in a rotation over in the recent history for the Ohio State wide receivers. So now they have to find a way to replace him playing that Z receiver, but frankly, he can play Z, he can play X, he can play in the slot as well. Ohio State's still trying to perhaps lure Mylan Graham back, which would help replace that Z position that Carnell Tate played so well. Losing Quincy Porter, of course, hurts, but it's Ohio State. There should be options, and we're going to talk about those options leading into spring ball for sure. So I guess that will wrap it on the Carnell Tate off to the NFL future first-round pick. You mentioned number 10 on the big board. That would be a contract of about $30-some million for a 4-year deal, so not a bad gig if you can get it. So that will do it here. If you want to hit the thumbs up, we'd appreciate it. Subscribe, hit the bell, all of those good things. And, of course, you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So that will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.